I was sitting in the front row, and it felt mighty strange. Not because I hadn't been to a funeral before, but because this one was for my brother. He'd always been there, like a shadow but a bright one, following you wherever you went. And now, he was gone. Folks around me spoke in hushed tones, their voices careful, like they were afraid to wake something that was in its final sleep. I listened to the words pouring from the pulpit, words about his life, his kindness, how much he meant to everyone. They were good words, true words, but they felt so far removed from the brother I knew, the one who could turn the most ordinary situation into something unbelievably funny. He was a master at finding the comical in the everyday, and that knack of his always amazed me. Even when we were just kids, he could spot a joke where others saw only dull routine, and that made every day with him a little brighter, a little easier. My mind started to wander, drifting away from the formal morning, and suddenly, like a flash, a moment from our childhood popped into my head. It was summer, hot and dusty, and we were just kids, full of energy and silly ideas. We were trying to build a spaceship out of cardboard boxes and an old tarp in the backyard. My brother, as always, was the head engineer, and I was his loyal assistant, handing him tools that, of course, were just old spoons and forks. I remember him trying to attach what he thought was an antenna, but instead, it fell right on his head, and he yelled something like, "Oh shoot, I think we just summoned aliens." His face then was so comical, with that cardboard box slipped sideways and his eyes peeking out from under it, full of surprise and, at the same time, pure joy at his own goofiness. And I couldn't help but laugh. It was such a genuine, contagious laugh that he started laughing too, and we both just sat there, on the dusty ground, amidst the wreckage of our spaceship, and laughed until tears streamed down our faces and our bellies ached. It was one of those moments when the world around us just faded away, leaving only the two of us and our carefree laughter echoing in the summer air. That memory was so vivid, so alive, I could almost smell the old grass and the dust rising from under our feet. It felt so real, I could almost reach out and touch it. If only I could go back to that time. That memory, so bright and unexpected, hit me right when the preacher was talking about his calm demeanor, his seriousness, and I couldn't hold back a smile. It just appeared, gentle, almost imperceptible, but I felt the corners of my lips turn up. I didn't try to hide it, because it felt so natural. That was my brother. And that was a memory of him, of his true essence, which was so much deeper than any official words. I felt the glances of a few people sitting nearby, sliding my way. Some gave me a side eye. Some, maybe, even looked disapproving, their faces showing surprise and a slight indignation. But I didn't care. In that moment, I only saw his face, his laugh, his eyes radiating such pure joy that could melt any ice. I knew how it looked from the outside, how it might be perceived, but if he were here, we'd be laughing together, and that would be the best farewell you could ever imagine. It would be the best tribute to his memory, because laughter was an inseparable part of his life, and he always wanted us to be happy, even after he was gone. We grew up in a house with a big yard, sitting on the edge of a small town, where every home had its own patch of green, and beyond that, the fields stretched out to the horizon like an endless green ocean. Our yard wasn't just a yard, it was a whole world of adventure, an endless playground for childhood fantasies, where every bush could hide a secret, and every shadow could be an unknown danger, just waiting to be explored. We had an old, rickety shed in the back, leaning a bit from years of wind and weather, but for us, It was a fortress, a space station ready for launch, or the peak of a towering mountain from which we'd launch ourselves into a giant, fluffy pile of hay, imagining ourselves fearless explorers conquering new heights, landing with a triumphant whoop. Those jumps from the shed roof were our daily ritual, a true test of bravery and trust, and my older brother always jumped first, showing the way, never hesitating, even if the landing wasn't always soft, and we'd spend hours afterward shaking bits of straw and dust out of our hair, laughing the whole time. I always followed him, feeling a mix of exhilarating fear and boundless excitement, because I knew that with him by my side, any adventure was possible, any obstacle could be overcome, and any fear, well, that just melted away. He had this incredible way of making even the simplest things feel grand, turning an ordinary afternoon into an epic quest, a journey into the unknown, right there in our own backyard. Our bicycles were a constant source of both joy and frustration, always broken in some new and interesting way. We'd spend countless hours taking them apart, trying to figure out how every gear and chain worked, and then, with more enthusiasm than skill, we'd put them back together, often finding ourselves with a few extra parts that we firmly believed made them even better, faster, more aerodynamic, ready for any race down the dirt road. These weren't just mechanical failures. They were our first forays into engineering, our early experiments, attempts to improve what was already there, or to create something absolutely new, something revolutionary that would change the world of two-wheeled transport forever. I vividly remember one particularly ambitious project where we tried to make a flying bicycle by attaching crude wings made of scavenged plywood we'd found in a dumpster behind the hardware store. Of course, it didn't fly, not even a little bit, but we ended up with plenty of scrapes and bruises, and, more importantly, unforgettable memories of rolling down a steep hill, pumping our legs furiously, desperately trying to take flight, and then collapsing in a heap of laughter, lying in a pile of fallen leaves, covered in dirt, and a profound sense of triumph, despite the lack of actual flight. Our adventures weren't limited to the confines of our yard, either. One memorable time, when we were still really little, perhaps no older than 5 or 6, we decided that the chickens in the coop were shivering and needed a bit of warmth. So, with the best of intentions, we tried to warm them up by building a small bonfire right inside the coop, using dry grass and twigs we'd meticulously gathered from all over the yard. This, of course, led to a rather dramatic fire in the chicken coop, which thankfully was quickly extinguished by our dad, who came running out of the house looking utterly terrified, armed with a shovel and a bucket of water. But the memories of his wide-eyed, frantic face and our earnest, full of childish naivete excuses remained etched in our minds forever, a bright, vivid, and slightly smoky spot in our collective memory. We were always full of these wild, often ill-conceived schemes, and he was always the one to push them forward, to make them happen, to convince me that they were perfectly logical, no matter how outlandish they seemed to anyone else. My older brother was, without a doubt, always the leader. He was a few years my senior, and that age gap, though small, gave him a natural air of authority that was never questioned, never challenged. He'd meticulously plan all the games, devise all the strategies, and orchestrate all the secret missions that could last for hours, sometimes even days, and take us to the most unexpected places, from the dusty corners of the attic to the muddy banks of the creek behind our house. But for all his leadership, he was a leader with an incredibly soft heart. He never, not once, abused his power, or made me feel inferior. Instead, he always looked out for me, the younger one, making sure I was safe and included, and he never, ever let me feel like I was in the way or weak, even when I clearly was. If I stumbled and fell, scraping my knee on the gravel path, he was always the very first one to run over, not to scold, but to comfort me, even if he was the one who had dared me to climb that tree in the first place. He'd then carefully clean the wound, meticulously applying a bandage like a true seasoned doctor, always making sure I was okay before we moved on to the next adventure. He was incredibly patient when I didn't understand something, no matter how many times he had to explain it, and always found a way to clarify complicated things in simple, relatable words, often using funny, memorable examples that helped me grasp everything, no matter how confusing or abstract it seemed at first. His gentleness wasn't a weakness, it was his greatest strength, a quiet power that made him a true older brother, the kind you could always count on, the one who was always there, no matter what challenges life threw our way. We'd spend long, lazy afternoons together, catching rainwater in old, dented buckets, pretending it was a magical elixir of life that would grant us incredible superpowers, and we'd drink it with our eyes squeezed shut, imagining our muscles growing stronger and our minds becoming sharper, capable of anything. Or we'd take our brightly colored markers and meticulously color old nails, calling them our secret weapons, magical tools that could change the color of anything we touched, and then we'd run around the yard, giggling, coloring everything from the weathered wooden fence to the rusty old doghouse. These little, seemingly insignificant and utterly nonsensical activities were entire worlds for us, filled with magic and wonder, where anything was possible and imagination reigned supreme, unbound by reality. We could sit for what felt like an eternity under the sprawling branches of the old oak tree in the yard, meticulously drawing our elaborate plans in the dirt with sticks, creating our intricate treasure maps that, of course, never led to real treasure, but always to new adventures and exciting discoveries, each one more thrilling than the last. He was the one who always believed in our wildest fantasies, who enthusiastically supported the craziest, most improbable ideas, and who, with his boundless energy and unwavering conviction, somehow made them real, at least for us kids, living in our own vibrant world where everything was possible and every single day was a new, exciting chapter in our grand, shared adventure. My brother always had my back, especially when we were in school. He was older, bigger, and he had this aura of calm about him that made even the toughest bullies think twice before messing with me, because they knew it was better not to cross him. I remember one time, when I was in the younger grades and he was already in high school, a couple of older kids started picking on me. They were bigger than me, and I was scared, feeling my heart pound in my chest like a drum. I stood there, pressed against the wall, trying to look brave, but my knees were trembling, and I could feel the sweat trickling down my back. Suddenly, he appeared. He just stepped between me and them without saying a single word. His mere presence was enough to change the whole atmosphere. His gaze was calm, but there was such power in it that the boys immediately understood that the jokes were over, and their bravado vanished like smoke in the wind. One of them, the cockiest one, tried to shove him, but my brother didn't even flinch, standing there like he was carved from stone. Then that kid, enraged, punched him right in the nose. I saw the blood start to flow, but my brother didn't even wince. His face remained unreadable. He just looked at the kid, and the bully immediately lost all his nerve, his eyes filling with fear. They turned around and walked away, practically running, and my brother turned to me, smiled faintly, and said, "It's all right, little man. Just don't pay any mind to types like that." He never complained about the pain, never showed weakness. He was always strong and unwavering, a true rock. He just wiped the blood from his nose and walked me home, as if nothing at all had happened, and I looked at him with awe, realizing he was a real hero, my personal protector. We had our own secret language of gestures, a silent code that nobody else understood. These weren't just simple hand movements. They were entire sentences, complex expressions that we used to communicate when we didn't want the grown-ups to hear us, or when we were surrounded by other kids and wanted to keep our conversation completely private, a secret world just for us. A single raise of an eyebrow could mean, "Let's get out of here, this is boring," and a light tap on the shoulder, "I know exactly what you're thinking." And we'd understand each other without a single word, as if we could read each other's minds, anticipating every thought. It was our own little mystery, our personal code, which made us even closer, creating an invisible bond that nobody could ever break, a connection that ran deeper than words. It was something that belonged only to the two of us, and that feeling of exclusivity was incredibly precious. It made us feel special, unique, unlike anyone else in the world. In the evenings, after our parents had finally gone to sleep, we'd share a bed. Our room was small, and we slept in one bed, which wasn't a problem for us at all. In fact, it was just another opportunity for adventures, for secret conversations that would often last deep into the night, long after we should have been asleep. We'd spend hours making up stories, whispering them to each other in the darkness, our voices kept low so as not to wake anyone else in the house. Our favorite series was called The Space Sausage Brothers. These were wild tales about two brothers who traveled through the cosmos on a spaceship made from a giant sausage, battling evil vegetables that were trying to take over the galaxy. Each new villain more ridiculous than the last. We'd invent new characters, new planets, new adventures, and each time our stories would become more and more incredible, more fantastical, pushing the boundaries of our imagination. These were silly, nonsensical, but so beloved stories, which always ended with good triumphing over evil and a large supply of sausage, which was our favorite cosmic fuel. These evenings were the most precious to me. They were filled with laughter, boundless imagination, and the unbreakable bond between us, a connection that time and distance could never diminish. It was our time, a sacred space where we were just the two of us, in our own private world, created from pure fantasy and love, where there was no room for worries or problems, just endless possibilities and shared dreams. I imitated my brother in everything. If he decided to play a sport, I wanted to too, and I'd try to mimic his every move, even if it was far too complicated for me, often ending up in a tangled mess. If he started reading a certain book, I'd ask him to lend it to me, even if it was way too advanced for my age, and I'd only understand half of it, but I'd pretend I got every word. He was my idol, my role model, my guiding star in this world. I wanted to be as brave, as kind, as smart as he was, and I tried to embody those qualities in myself, striving to be just like him in every way. I'd try to copy his mannerisms, his jokes, his perspective on the world, and he never laughed at my attempts. On the contrary, he encouraged me, helped me, taught me, always supporting my endeavors, no matter how small or silly. He wasn't just an older brother. He was my mentor, my best friend, my rock, the one who always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. And even when we grew up, and life pulled us in different directions, a part of me always remained that little boy who imitated his older brother in everything, and his influence on my life was immense, truly shaping me as a person. This bond forged in childhood was unbreakable. Even if we weren't always physically together, it remained deep in my heart, like an unquenchable flame, a constant reminder of our shared past and enduring connection. Life, as it often does, pulled us apart. He went off to the army, serving his country, while I enrolled in a university in a different city, miles away, and our paths slowly began to diverge, each of us searching for our own place in the sun, our own purpose. Those years were a time of immense change, a period when each of us was building our own life, chasing our own dreams, creating our own worlds that no longer intersected as frequently as they once did. We weren't those same kids anymore, the ones who shared a bed and made up stories about the Space Sausage Brothers. Now we had different worries, different interests, different people filling our lives, pulling us in new directions. Distance and new responsibilities took their toll, and our relationship, though it never truly vanished, cooled, like a fire slowly dying down, its embers still glowing but less intensely. We didn't call each other every day anymore, didn't share every little detail, every triumph or setback as we had before. Conversations grew shorter, more formal, filled with general phrases that didn't quite reach the depths of our souls, leaving a lingering sense of unspoken words. This wasn't a conscious decision, not a deliberate choice to drift apart. It just happened. Life pulled us in different directions, and we allowed it to happen, not fully realizing what precious thing we were losing, what a vital connection was slowly fraying. But the respect we had for each other, that remained unshakable, like a solid rock amidst a stormy sea. Even when we weren't talking as often as before, I always knew I could count on him, no matter what, and he, I'm absolutely certain, knew the same about me. It was that invisible thread that connected us, despite the distance and the passage of time, a thread that couldn't be broken, no matter how thin it seemed to become. We'd see each other occasionally on holidays, at family gatherings, and those moments, though brief, were always warm, filled with genuine joy at seeing each other again, a silent acknowledgement of our enduring bond. We didn't need a lot of words to understand each other. A single glance, a shared smile, and we'd comprehend everything without needing explanations, as if we could read each other's minds, anticipating every thought and feeling. We could sit for hours side by side, not speaking, but feeling this deep, shared silence, which was more profound than any conversation, because it was filled with our shared memories, our shared perspectives on the world, our shared values that had been forged in childhood. We knew that we existed for each other, that we supported each other, even if it wasn't expressed in daily conversations, but only in our quiet presence, in the unspoken understanding that always existed between us, a comfort that transcended words. We could talk politics, sports, or just quietly watch TV together, and that silence was just as comfortable, just as meaningful as the liveliest conversation. These moments weren't filled with words, but with understanding, a deep, wordless comprehension that existed only between us. We both were the kind of people who didn't like a lot of unnecessary chatter, and that was one of the things that united us, making our interactions so easy and natural, so effortless. We could sit for hours side by side, and that silence felt more profound than any conversation, because it was filled with history, with shared memories, with common experiences that had shaped us both. It was a feeling of comfort, a sense of being with someone who understood you without words, who knew your story, your thoughts, your feelings, who could see right through you. It was a feeling of home, even if we were in an unfamiliar place, because home isn't just walls and a roof, it's the people who understand and love you, who make you feel safe and truly seen. I didn't know how much my brother missed those times, how much he longed for our closeness, until it was too late. He never spoke about it directly. He was a reserved man, one who didn't like to show his feelings openly, considering it a sign of weakness. But now, looking back, I can see those little signs, those subtle hints that I missed back then, because I was too caught up in my own life, too focused on my own path. His gaze when we said goodbye after holidays, those lingering hugs that seemed a little longer than usual, his questions about my life that seemed so mundane, but which perhaps were an attempt to rekindle the bond we had in childhood, an effort to become closer again, to bridge the growing gap. I was busy with my own life, my career, my family, and I didn't notice how he, perhaps, was waiting for the same from me, the same closeness, the same understanding, the same unspoken support that he had always given me. And now that he's gone, I realize how much we lost, how many things we left unsaid, how many things we left undone, how many opportunities for connection we simply let slip away. That thought, like a sharp pain, pierces me, and I regret every missed call, every unsaid phrase, every chance we lost to just be together, to talk, to laugh. This feeling of guilt, like a heavy stone, weighs on my soul, and I understand that nothing can be changed now, but the memories remain, and with them, the bitter taste of lost opportunities, a constant reminder of what could have been. I found out my brother was gravely ill, and that news, like a bolt of lightning from a clear sky, struck me deep in my soul, leaving me breathless and disoriented. It was completely unexpected, a cruel twist of fate, because he had always seemed so strong, so invincible, the kind of person who never got sick, who was always full of boundless energy and an unyielding zest for life. But the doctors, with their somber faces and hushed tones, said there was still time, that there was a glimmer of hope, however faint, and that fragile hope, like a tiny flickering candle in the dark, gave me a desperate surge of strength, making me believe in a better outcome, making me think about a future where we could somehow defy the odds and overcome this together, side by side. My first immediate instinct was to go to him right away, to drop everything and be by his side, to support him through this agonizingly difficult time, to hold his hand, to offer whatever comfort I could, to make him feel that he wasn't alone in this brutal fight. But my brother, true to his nature, didn't want any fuss. He was always the kind of man who intensely disliked drawing attention to himself, especially when he was feeling unwell or vulnerable. He had a quiet dignity and didn't want to be seen as weak or diminished in any way. He gently asked me not to come, saying he needed peace and quiet, that he didn't want me to see him like that, to witness his suffering firsthand, to see the toll the illness was taking on him. His words were calm, almost detached, but there was such an unshakable firmness in them that I couldn't argue. I understood that he had made his decision, and it was final, leaving me with a profound sense of helplessness. I hesitated, caught in a painful dilemma. On one hand, I felt an overwhelming primal desire to be by his side, to physically be there to support him through this tough period, to be his rock, his strength, to offer whatever comfort I could, even if it was just my silent presence. On the other hand, there were so many practical things holding me back, so many responsibilities and obligations that prevented me from simply dropping everything and going without a second thought. My job, which was demanding and required my full presence and attention, couldn't just be abandoned. And then there was my family, my wife, my kids, who needed my care, my time, my love, and my unwavering support, and I felt a deep responsibility to them too. And, to be completely honest, there was fear. A deep, gnawing fear of seeing his weakness, a fear of seeing him in a state I had never witnessed before, a fear of confronting the harsh, undeniable reality of his illness. He had always been a towering symbol of strength for me, of unyielding resilience, a man who seemed unbreakable, and the thought of seeing him diminished, changed, vulnerable, terrified me to my core, shaking my very foundations. I was afraid that it would shatter the idealized image I had of him in my mind, the image of an unconquerable hero, and I wasn't sure I could bear that. I was afraid that it would be too painful, too overwhelming, that I wouldn't be able to cope with that kind of raw grief, that kind of profound loss, that it would simply break me. I tried desperately to justify myself, to rationalize my inaction, telling myself that he himself had asked me not to come, that I was merely respecting his wishes, that it was his choice, and I had no right to interfere with his autonomy. But deep down, in the quiet, honest corners of my soul, I knew it was just an excuse, a flimsy shield, that I was simply looking for a way to avoid the pain, to shield myself from the inevitable sorrow that awaited me. I was afraid to face the reality, to face the undeniable fact that my brother, my hero, could be vulnerable, that he might truly need me, and I wouldn't be able to be there for him, not in the way he deserved, not in the way he had always been there for me. I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to handle it, that I would prove to be weak in the face of such adversity, that I would crumble. I thought about how we had always been strong together, how we had faced and overcome every difficulty, every obstacle that stood in our way, always facing them as a united front, two against the world. And now, when he needed my support the most, when he was fighting his toughest battle, I felt utterly helpless, like a small child lost in a vast, dark forest, unable to find my way. This helplessness was a bitter, corrosive feeling, and it gnawed at me from the inside, giving me no peace, day or night, a constant, nagging ache. I tried to find a compromise, a middle ground, thinking about going for just a few days, a quick visit, so he wouldn't feel abandoned, so he would at least know that I loved him, that I cared deeply, that he was in my thoughts. But his words, his quiet, firm plea not to come, echoed relentlessly in my mind, and I couldn't ignore them. They were like a powerful, unbreakable spell, binding me to my indecision. I was torn, agonizingly so, between the burning desire to be by his side and the paralyzing fear of witnessing his suffering, of seeing him fade away, and this internal conflict exhausted me completely, draining my last ounce of strength, leaving me hollow. I honestly didn't know what to do, and every day that passed only intensified my crushing sense of guilt, like a heavy, invisible burden I carried on my shoulders, growing heavier with each passing moment, each missed opportunity. The last conversation. I remember it so clearly, like it was just yesterday. Every sound, every word, every pause etched into my memory. The phone rang, and I picked it up, his voice on the other end, quiet, but calm, almost serene, like he had already made peace with his fate, accepted what was coming. He said, "If you don't make it, it's okay. I know." Those words, so simple, yet so profoundly deep, pierced me right through like a sharp knife, leaving a deep, aching wound in my heart. I felt that this was a farewell, a true, final goodbye, a parting from everything that had been between us, from our shared history. He didn't speak about death, not directly, but I could feel its presence in every single word he uttered, in every breath he took, in every silence between his phrases. It was as if he had already let go of everything, and now he just wanted me to know that he understood, that he wasn't holding any grudges, that he forgave me for my hesitation, his magnanimity boundless and overwhelming. I felt, deep in my gut, that this was indeed a farewell. My throat tightened, clenching up, and I couldn't manage to say anything important, not a single word that could express the full depth of my feelings, the swirling emotions inside me. All the words I wanted to say, all the heartfelt declarations, got stuck somewhere deep inside, trapped like flies in a spider web, and I couldn't release them, couldn't force them out. I wanted to tell him how much I loved him, how much he meant to me, how grateful I was for everything he had done for me, for every single moment we had shared, every laugh, every adventure, but I couldn't. My lips felt glued together, my tongue heavy. It felt as if any serious word, any profound statement, would make this moment even more painful, even more real, even more utterly final. I was afraid that if I told him about my feelings, it would be an admission that he was leaving, that he was abandoning me, that he was slipping away. And I didn't want to admit that. I wanted him to stay with me, to remain that same strong, invincible brother I had known all my life, the one who was always there. Instead, I ended the conversation with a joke. It was an old joke, one of those silly ones we used to tell each other in childhood. One of those that always made us burst into laughter, no matter how many times we'd heard it. It was about the Space Sausage Brothers, of course, about their incredible, nonsensical adventures across the cosmos. I don't even remember exactly what I said, but it was something completely absurd. Something that was meant to bring a smile to his face. Something that was supposed to lighten the heavy atmosphere, even just for a moment. And he laughed. It was a quiet, husky laugh, but it was a laugh, a real one, genuine and pure, filled with such love, such understanding. It was the last laugh I ever heard from him, and it stayed with me, echoing in my memory like a distant bell. That laugh, so weak yet so sincere, remained with me, echoing in my memory, reminding me of his zest for life, his enduring spirit. It was filled with such love, such understanding, that I felt my heart tearing into 1,000 pieces right there in my chest. I hung up the phone, and the silence in the room seemed deafening, as if the whole world had suddenly stopped, holding its breath. I stood there, still holding the receiver, and felt the tears welling up in my eyes, but I couldn't hold them back. They just streamed down my face. This was the end, and I knew it, but his laugh, his last laugh, was with me, like a final gift, a last farewell, forever etched into my soul. The news came in the morning. I was standing by the kitchen sink, holding a cup of coffee and looking out the window, where the sun had just begun to rise over the rooftops, painting the sky in soft pink and orange hues. The world seemed so peaceful, so ordinary, as if nothing had changed, as if everything was just as it always had been, a perfectly normal start to a day. The phone rang and I answered, feeling some strange premonition, a cold dread creeping into my stomach. The voice on the other end of the line was quiet, but I immediately understood that something was terribly wrong. Something awful had happened, something that would change everything forever. The words he spoke were simple, yet they sounded like a verdict, like the final chord of a tragic symphony, sealing my fate. "He's gone," the voice said. And in that very moment, as those words echoed in my ears, the cup slipped from my hands, as if it had suddenly lost all its weight, becoming weightless. It fell to the floor, shattering into hundreds of tiny pieces, and the coffee spread across the tiles, forming a dark, ugly stain that seemed to symbolize my own broken world, my shattered reality. I didn't pick it up. I just stood there, staring at the broken cup, at the spilled coffee, and felt my legs turn to jelly, as if I had lost the ability to stand, to support myself. I slowly sank to the floor, feeling the cold tiles beneath me, a stark contrast to the burning pain inside. I sat there, amidst the fragments, and felt the world around me crumble into pieces, like a sandcastle collapsing from the slightest breath of wind, leaving nothing but dust. The pain was so sharp, so unbearable that I couldn't breathe. It felt as if my lungs had seized up, and the air simply wouldn't come in. I closed my eyes tightly, desperately trying to push away this reality, this horrifying truth. But it was there, it was real, it was inescapable, a cruel, undeniable fact. My brother, my older brother whom I had known all my life, whom I had loved, whom I had looked up to, he was no longer here. That thought, like a cold wave, washed over me, and I felt my heart clench with pain, as if an invisible hand had squeezed it tight, leaving me gasping for air. I don't know how long I sat there, on the cold floor, amidst the shards of the broken cup, maybe minutes, maybe hours. Time had lost all meaning. It simply stopped for me, suspended in a void of grief. Then, slowly, I got up. My movements were sluggish, mechanical, as if I were a puppet, controlled by an unseen puppeteer, every action devoid of emotion. I walked to the closet, pulled out my best suit, the one I only wore for special occasions, the one I had worn to weddings and graduations. I started packing it, meticulously folding the shirt, the tie, the socks, each movement deliberate, without any emotion, as if I were performing a routine task, a chore. I felt like a robot, executing programmed actions, without thoughts, without feelings, just going through the motions. I wasn't thinking about anything. I was just doing what I had to do, as if someone else were controlling my body, guiding my hands. It was as if my brain had shut down, a protective mechanism to shield me from the overwhelming pain, from this unbearable reality. I simply packed the suit, preparing for the last journey, for the last meeting with my brother, for the final farewell. My hands moved on their own, while my mind was empty, like a blank sheet of paper on which not a single word had yet been written. It was strange, this absence of emotion, this sheer mechanicalness, but perhaps it was the only way to cope with what had happened, the only way to survive this nightmare, to simply exist in the face of such devastating loss. On the train ride to the city where the funeral was to be held, I sat by the window, and the landscapes outside blurred past, like distorted pictures merging into one continuous, indistinct streak. But my thoughts weren't out there. They were deep in the past, in memories that surfaced one after another, like old photographs coming to life in my head, filling it with vivid, vibrant images. Every stop the train made, every distinct sound, every familiar smell, seemed to trigger a new memory, a new snapshot from our shared life, forcing me to relive those moments, to feel them all over again. I saw his face, his infectious smile, his eyes that sparkled with joy and mischief. I felt his presence right there beside me, as if he were sitting in the same compartment, sharing this solemn journey with me, a silent companion. I remembered how my brother taught me to swim. I must have been about 5 then, and I was absolutely terrified of the water. It seemed vast and dangerous, an endless swirling abyss. He patiently held me in his arms, showing me how to kick my legs, how to breathe, how to overcome my fear, his voice calm and reassuring. He never laughed at my terror. On the contrary, he encouraged me, telling me I could do it, that I was strong, that I was brave enough. And when I finally swam by myself for the very first time, he was happier than I was, his face beaming with pride and pure delight. His joy was so genuine, so contagious, that I felt it throughout my entire being, a warmth spreading through me. I remembered how we once fought over a girl. It was our first serious argument, a real knockdown, drag-out fight, and it felt like the end of the world back then, as if everything we had built was crumbling. We didn't speak for a few days, a silence that felt like an eternity, but then he came to me, extended his hand and said, "Well, you idiot, are we going to make up?" And we did, as always, as if nothing had happened, the argument forgotten in an instant. Our quarrels never lasted long, because our love was stronger than any disagreements, stronger than any grudges, stronger than any fleeting anger. I remembered how we used to steal apricots together from the neighbor's garden. It was our favorite summer pastime, a ritual we repeated every year, a thrilling, forbidden adventure. We'd sneak through the fence, trying not to make a sound, and gather ripe, juicy apricots, stuffing our pockets until they bulged. It was so exciting, so dangerous, and we felt like real spies on a top-secret mission. And when we returned home, with pockets full of apricots, we felt like true heroes, having conquered a hidden treasure. These memories, so vivid, so alive, filled me up, like a warm wave washing over my body, bringing comfort amidst the sorrow. I laughed, recalling our silly escapades, our childish antics, our shared secrets, our whispered plans. And at the same time, I cried, because I knew that those moments would never come again, that they remained only in my memory, like precious pearls, forever locked away, yet shining brightly. I laughed and cried at the same time. Tears streamed down my face, mixing with my smile, creating a strange, yet utterly sincere expression. It was a peculiar blend of emotions, but it was so genuine, so real, so utterly natural. That was my brother, and those were our memories. They were filled with joy, with laughter, with love, with everything that had made our lives so vibrant and full. And even in this moment of profound pain, they brought me comfort, like a warm ray of sunshine breaking through the clouds, offering a glimpse of hope. I understood that he would always be with me, in my memories, in my heart, in every corner of my soul, an inseparable part of who I was. And that gave me the strength to keep moving forward, even if it was so hard, even if the pain felt unbearable, a constant ache. Every memory was like a small treasure that I held in my soul, and I knew that these treasures would never disappear. They would be with me until the end of my days, reminding me of how wonderful his life had been, and how much he had given me, how much he had shaped me. At the funeral, people spoke the right words. They talked about his kindness, about his contributions to the community, about how much he meant to everyone, as if reading from a textbook, reciting well-worn phrases. I listened, but my mind was far away, wandering somewhere in the past, in our shared memories, in the echoes of our laughter. I looked at the coffin, and in my head, I could almost hear my brother scoffing at all the pomp and circumstance, at all these official speeches that he would have found so incredibly boring and pretentious. He never liked formality, never liked being praised. He was a simple, genuine man who valued true feelings and honest connections above all else. He was always straightforward, sincere, and I knew he would have just rolled his eyes right then and said, "Oh, cut out this circus," and his voice echoed in my head so clearly, as if he were standing right beside me. That thought brought a faint smile to my face, which I quickly tried to hide, not wanting to draw any more attention to myself. At some point, while the preacher was talking about his angelic nature, about his sinlessness, I remembered how we stole Santa Claus's suit. It was right before Christmas, and we decided to help Dad, who was supposed to play Santa at the school holiday party, to make his performance even more unforgettable, even more magical. We snuck up to the attic, found the suit, which was hidden in an old, dusty chest, and decided to try it on. My brother, of course, was Santa Claus, and I was his loyal elf, helping him get dressed, struggling with the oversized costume. He tried to go down the chimney to deliver presents, but he got stuck, his legs dangling out, while his head was still inside. I remember his legs sticking out of the chimney, and his muffled voice echoing from within, full of frustration and at the same time laughter. He tried to pull himself out, but he couldn't budge. We laughed so hard then, trying to pull him out, and that scene was so comical, so utterly ridiculous, that we couldn't stop laughing, tears streaming down our faces. It was such a silly yet incredibly vivid memory, one that kept coming back to me, bringing a warmth to my chest. And then, that smile just appeared. It was genuine, unstoppable, and I didn't try to hold it back, because it was a part of me, a part of my memory of him, an expression of our bond. It was a reflection of my memories of him, of his life, of his laughter, of his carefree spirit. This wasn't a sign of disrespect. On the contrary, it was a profound expression of deep love and remembrance, a testament to the fact that he would always live on in my heart, vibrant and alive. I felt it spreading across my face, and I knew it was right, that it was the only way to say goodbye to him, to truly honor him. It was my way of saying farewell, remembering him for who he truly was. Joyful, carefree, always ready for an adventure, for any kind of mischief. And I let that smile stay, despite the glances of others, despite their judgment. It was my smile, and it was for him, for my brother, who always knew how to make me laugh, even in the toughest moments. It was my last gift to him, a gift filled with love and gratitude for everything he had given me, for every moment we shared. People, of course, looked on disapprovingly. I could feel their gazes sliding over me, like sharp blades piercing right through me. They probably thought I was crazy, or that I simply didn't care, that I wasn't feeling any grief at all. I saw their furrowed brows, their tightly pressed lips, their eyes expressing surprise and a slight indignation. Their eyes seemed to say, "How dare you smile at a funeral? That's disrespectful." I understood their reaction. In our society, funerals are a time for sorrow, for tears, for mourning, and any other emotion is considered out of place, inappropriate, even offensive. A smile here is out of line. It breaks all the rules, all the unwritten laws of proper conduct. But in that moment, I didn't care about those rules, about those laws. My smile wasn't for them. It was for him, for my brother, who always knew how to make me laugh, no matter the circumstances. And then I saw her, a woman sitting a little further back, in the third row. She was a classmate of my brother's. I remembered her from childhood. She had always been kind and empathetic. She was looking at me, and on her face, there was a smile too. A faint one, almost imperceptible, but it was there, and I felt my heart clench with gratitude, a sudden warmth spreading through my chest. It was a smile of understanding, a smile of empathy, the smile of someone who knew him, who truly understood his essence, his spirit. She wasn't judging me. She understood that my smile wasn't a sign of disrespect, but a profound expression of love, a testament to our bond. She walked up to me after the ceremony. Her eyes were moist, but that same smile, the one that warmed my soul, still played on her face. She touched my shoulder gently and said, "He would have been happy you remembered that exact moment." Her words were like balm to my soul. They confirmed what I had felt. They gave me permission to be myself, to grieve in my own way. In that moment, I understood. Joy and pain can coexist. They don't exclude each other. They can reside side by side, like two sides of the same coin, inseparable. The pain of loss was unbearable. It pierced me through and through. But the joy from the memories of his life, of his laughter, was just as strong, just as vivid, just as real. It was as if two rivers flowed parallel, not mixing, but not hindering each other either, each carrying its own unique water. I realized that his memory didn't have to be solely sorrowful. It could be filled with light, with joy, with laughter, with all the things that made his life so special, so vibrant. This was a revelation, an epiphany that changed my entire perspective on loss, on grief, on memory itself. I no longer felt guilty for my smile. On the contrary, I felt that it was the best way to honor his memory, the best way to keep him alive in my heart. It was a way to keep him alive in my heart, not allowing the pain to consume all the memories, all the bright moments we had shared. And this woman, her smile, her words, helped me realize that. They gave me permission to be myself, to be genuine in my grief, even if it seemed unusual to others, even if it went against common norms. It was a liberation, a release from the burden of guilt, a freedom from the fear of being misunderstood, a profound sense of peace. After the funeral, when everyone had left, and silence once again settled over the house, a heavy, almost tangible quiet, I went to the old closet in his room. I knew there was a box in there, a box full of memories. He was always sentimental, always kept every little thing that had meaning to him, every trinket that reminded him of important moments in his life, from childhood drawings to old ticket stubs. I pulled it out, and dust motes danced in the air like tiny ghosts of the past, swirling in the sunbeams filtering through the window. Inside there were old photographs, yellowed with time, showing us as children, with carefree smiles and missing front teeth. Letters, written by hand, that I had never read, but now felt a deep, undeniable urge to. Cassettes with old music we used to listen to in childhood, music that now seemed to me like a voice from the past, a melody carrying forgotten tunes. Each item was like a small portal to the past, opening up new memories, new emotions, a flood of feelings washing over me. I went through them, and each touch brought a wave of emotion, rolling over me like a sea wave, bringing both joy and a gentle ache. I found an old story, written by hand, on yellowed sheets of paper, with childish drawings scribbled in the margins, stick figures and crude spaceships. It was The Space Sausage Brothers Part 7. I remembered how we'd invented it, how we'd laughed, meticulously writing down every word, every line of dialogue, every absurd adventure. It was our last shared story, one we never finished. It just stopped abruptly at the most exciting part, leaving us hanging. I started to read, and his voice, his intonations, his jokes, seemed to echo in my head, as if he were sitting right next to me, reading it aloud, his familiar cadence filling the room. It was like he was right there, reading it aloud, and I could almost feel his warmth, his presence, a comforting weight beside me. I read on, and a smile appeared on my face, a soft, gentle smile. It was the same smile I'd worn at the funeral, but now it was filled with warmth and tenderness, filled with love and profound gratitude for all the joy he'd brought. I smiled. "You always knew how to end on a good note," I whispered, speaking to the empty air, to his spirit, which I truly believed was still near, still listening. Even in this unfinished story, he had left it on a positive note, with a sense of hope for continuation, for new adventures, for new discoveries just around the corner. That was so typical of him. He was always an optimist, always saw the bright side of things, even in the most difficult situations, even when everything seemed utterly hopeless and bleak. And this story, this small piece of our childhood, was proof of that. It was his message to me, a final, enduring message. It was his message to me, a message that life goes on, that memories remain, and that laughter will always find its way, even in the saddest moments, even when it feels like everything is lost. I closed the box, but I didn't put it away. It stayed on the table, a constant reminder that he would always be with me, in my memories, in my heart, in my laughter, in every corner of my soul. It was his gift to me, a gift I would cherish until the end of my days, a legacy of joy and connection. I came back home, but I left a note on the table. Brothers' Day. August 10th, don't forget. This was my decision, my way of honoring his memory, my way of keeping him alive in my heart, a personal tradition just for us. It wasn't a day of mourning, but a day of memories, a day of laughter, a day of joy, a day of gratitude for all the time we had together. Every year on that day, I'd set up an evening for myself with movies, chips, and silly stories that we both loved. I'd rewatch old comedies we used to laugh at together until our sides ached. I'd eat the chips he adored so much, and I'd recall all those absurd adventures we'd lived through, all those moments that made our lives so bright and memorable. It was my ritual, my way of feeling his presence near again, his laughter, his warmth, his spirit. It was my way of being with him again, if only for a few hours, in my memories, a comforting reunion that transcended time. All of it. Just to remember the laughter, not the pain, not the loss, but specifically the laughter. The laughter he brought into my life. The laughter we shared. The laughter that made our lives so vibrant and full of light. I wanted his memory to be filled with joy, not sorrow, for it to be bright, not dark, a beacon of happiness. I wanted his legacy to be a legacy of laughter, not tears, a legacy of joy, not grief. And every year, as I sat there in my living room, surrounded by memories, I felt him smiling with me, his spirit filling the room, a gentle, comforting presence. It was as if he was right there, sharing this evening with me, these memories, this joy. It was my way of keeping him alive, not letting time erase him from my memory, not letting the pain overshadow the bright moments. And that was the best I could do for him, the best way to honor his memory, the best way to tell him that I loved him and that I would always remember him, always keep him close. I was afraid that remembering would be painful. I thought every memory of him would only bring tears, only pain, only a deep ache that would gnaw at me from the inside. But it turned out you can remember with laughter too. My smile at the funeral wasn't a sign of disrespect. It was an expression of true love, a testament to the fact that his life was full of joy and that joy remains with me, a constant, comforting presence. It was a love that allowed me to remember him not just with sadness, but with joy, with gratitude, for all the moments we shared, for all the adventures we experienced together, for every single laugh. True love, that's when you can smile, even when you're losing someone, when you can find light in the darkness, when you can find joy amidst the grief. It doesn't mean you're not grieving. It means your love is stronger than the pain, stronger than the loss, stronger than any obstacle. A smile. It's not a betrayal of memory, but it's continuation. It's a way to keep a person alive in your heart, not letting the pain consume all the bright memories, not letting grief overshadow the joy. It's a confirmation that the life they lived was filled with happiness, and that happiness stays with you, even after they're gone, even when they're no longer physically by your side. We all remain in someone's mind as laughter, and that perhaps is the best kind of immortality. It's not about monuments or books. It's about those moments when someone remembers you and smiles, recalling your jokes, your antics, your laughter, your carefree spirit. It's about leaving behind not just memories of sorrow, but of joy, of light, of love, of everything that made your life so special, so vibrant. And my brother, I'm sure, remained in my mind exactly like that, as laughter, bright, contagious, carefree laughter, which will always be with me, a constant source of warmth and comfort,